Okay, so good morning, everybody. I'm Andrew from Australian Bookkeepers Network. For those of you I haven't met yet, welcome to our webinar. Today we are monitoring the chat for questions, so please, if you have any questions along the way, I've been given full permission from Rutland to interrupt as much as I can. So pop them into the chat, and we're happy to sort of answer those as we go through. And we all also are recording the presentation as well. So if you are busy taking notes, please know that you do actually get a copy of the recording sent through to you, so you can just jump on in and watch the content and the topics we're covering today. So today's webinar is with Harvey Norman Technology for Business, and they are covering phishing with AI, but also AI in general and the biggest productivity tool since Excel, or the biggest data leak. So really covering AI and what it does in your business, but also what it means from a cyber perspective as well. So we are joined by Rutland Smith. For those of you that are new and haven't joined one of our webinars before, Rutland is the director of Harvey Norman Technology for Business, and they are a long-standing partner of Australian Bookkeepers Network, and we always really enjoy their insights into the cyberspace. And it's something that sort of bookkeepers need to be across, but also for your clients as well. It's good information for them to be across as well. So, as I mentioned, if you have burning questions, pop them into the chat. Happy to help you out as we're going through. Recording has started, so I'm going to pass over to Rutland. He's going to jump on in and share everything he can and his knowledge today on our topic of AI and data leak and cyber. So over to you. Thanks, Rutland.
Thanks, Andrew, and good morning, everyone. And as Andrew said, I sat down to prepare this presentation and I looked at the original title and I thought, we can probably cover a lot more than this in the time allocated. So we'll cover the original topic, but I also want to talk about the cybersecurity aspects of AI. I know that all of you are probably using AI either, in a small way or in quite a large way, but I think it's just a good opportunity to talk through some of the things you need to be aware of and some of the risks that you just need to make sure that you're mitigating against. And I'll start by sharing with you that this entire presentation has been created by AI. The little animation that's on the screen was created by AI. The video that I'll play later was created by AI. But every slide, every photograph, every piece of text was created by AI. And like anything, when I created the first draft, it was about 80 to 85% right. And that took about 3 minutes. But then I spent hours using AI to refine it to get to where it needed to be. And I think that's a really important aspect of AI. You should never just accept the first draft. You've got to use it to do the grunt work, but then you've still got to do the refining yourself. And one of the things I wanted to do today is really get you thinking about client trust. And I want to open with a question for everybody to ask themselves. And it's a very simple scenario, but you're sitting in your office and the phone rings and it's a good client and they ask you the question, I hear you've been using AI. Have you uploaded any of my information into it? It's not a question of have I broken the law? It's not a question of is it technically allowed? It's really just a question of, how comfortable would you feel answering that question with a yes? Because at the end of the day, trust is really the foundation of bookkeeping. I know that in your industry, most of you have spent a long time developing your reputation and trust with your clients. And trust is one of those things that it's hard to gain, but it's easily lost. And whilst, a lot of your clients probably don't understand cybersecurity, they probably don't fully understand AI, one of the things that they do understand is trust. So today we're really going to talk about how we protect that trust. We're also going to talk about how you protect your business and how you protect your clients. But one of the key themes today is protecting the trust that you have with your clients around the usage of AI. And, there's no avoiding AI. every now and then I talk to someone and they sort of jokingly say, "Oh, it's all becoming so hard. I'm just going to go back to pen and paper." And I get that. Like I do understand why people make that sort of joke. But AI is probably the biggest productivity shift we will see in our lifetimes. We've seen some big ones in the past, as you can see there on screen, but AI literally changes knowledge work. For the first time in history, you've got access to a tool that can write, that can analyze, that can summarize, that can explain, even brainstorm. Right. And not only can it can do it very, very quickly. Right. So it's a really powerful tool, but it's important to understand that powerful tools create powerful risks. And so we'll go through some of those things as we get into it today. Obviously, you guys are already using AI. Everything from email drafting, social media posts, client newsletters, um, right through to meeting summaries and Excel formulas. I used AI the other day to create an entire Excel sheet, and it was quite a complicated sheet. We're in the business of selling subscriptions. It analysed recurring revenue over a 2-year period. It had about 10 multiples, and it built the sheet in such a way that I could change the multiples and get financial modelling. And it only took about 3 prompts, and then it took about a minute to build it. So it's so powerful, and it's really wonderful for those sorts of tasks. And today is not about discouraging you from using AI. Let's look at some of the practical uses. It's really good at everything that you see there on screen. Drafting emails, writing procedures, improving communications. And I suspect that many, many of you are already using AI to do all of these types of tasks. And if you're not, here's some practical examples of some of the prompts that you could be using. A really simple one, write a polite email chasing overdue information. We've all had that situation where we're chasing information and the client seems to be distracted, or for whatever reason it takes too long, but you kind of get to a point where you have to get the information. And sometimes wording that just right can be quite difficult. So, using something like AI is a great way to do that. Create a checklist for onboarding a new client. I sort of do those sorts of things all the time. And whenever I go down the path of looking at things like checklists or workflows or procedures, yeah, about 80% of it's stuff that I would have got anyway, but there's always 2 or 3 things in there that I would have forgotten. There's always 2 or 3 things like, oh, yes, I didn't think of that, but that should be in there. It's a great suggestion. Social media posts, draft a social media post explaining why bank reconciliations matter. If you communicate through social with your clients and you're always doing that sort of education, it can really make doing that quite easy for you. So I think it's great to use it for low risk situations, and that involves no confidential information. And to me, that's really probably the safest place to start, right? But what you need to be aware of is that the most common risk, right, particularly if you've got staff, is actually giving information away yourself, right? Some people sort of might hack the AI, and that's possible. I'll show you some examples of that later on today. But what's interesting is the biggest, I think, risk is that we share information with AI without really thinking about what we're sharing and whether or not we should be sharing that information with AI. The risk often comes from good people trying to work more efficiently with no malicious intent, but they enter information that could end up leaking. And that's a problem, particularly when we look at it in the context of the trust that you have with your clients. And there's some interesting real-world examples. Back in 2023, when AI was relatively new to us all, there were engineers who were working on super confidential designs of chips. So Samsung make chips, they put them in their phones, they sell them to other vendors. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of the value of the patents and the copyrights. And instantly, some of the staff loaded the code into ChatGPT. And the idea was that they would get ChatGPT to assist with making the code more efficient. And the risk that they just didn't realize at the time was they were exposing extremely confidential company information. And look, as a result, Samsung restricted AI tools internally, and a lot of big companies around the world have very strict AI policies about when AI can't be used and which particular AI they will allow their employees to use. So that's the sort of stuff that has happened in the past. Now, that's a big story, that's kind of gets the newspaper headlines. But I came up with a bit of an example here of the sort of thing that might happen in a bookkeeper's business. And I want you to kind of think about, okay, you've got this opportunity to analyze the payroll file and just do a simple thing, identify all employees whose salary increased by more than 10%. And then you attach the spreadsheets with the names, the salaries, the leave balances, the payroll numbers. Now, AI can absolutely do the task. That is not a difficult thing for AI to do. But the question is, should it have been given the data? Many people focus on whether AI can help, but what we're trying to do today is talk a little bit about stopping, just pausing, and asking whether the information should be shared in the first place. And it all comes back to that conversation around client trust. And one of the things I want to encourage you to do today is think a little bit about AI and entering information using this confidentiality test. Would I email this information to a stranger? It's a good question to ask yourself. If you wouldn't email the information to a stranger, then you need to think very carefully before uploading the information into an AI. It's just a little way of thinking about how you use the AI. And now we're going to just sort of jump into some of the scarier stuff. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can protect yourself, how you can have guidelines against it. But everything that we've just talked about in terms of what should we be asking ourselves before we share information, you're now going to get a little bit more of an insight into how the criminals are using AI and some of the things that you need to both be looking out for, but also considering within your business. And AI scams are already here. The title of this presentation originally was How AI Has Changed Phishing. And there's probably a lot of people here today who can remember that when you were receiving security training on phishing emails, you were encouraged to look for things like spelling mistakes, grammatical mistakes, formatting errors. Because in the original days, the criminals quite often weren't very good at crafting phishing emails. A lot of the time they were crafting it in a language that wasn't their first language. So they were making mistakes. We all know the Nigerian prince stories from years ago, and quite often those emails would come in and they were very poorly written, so they were reasonably easy to spot. And now with AI, that's completely gone. You know, you can write the perfect email using AI to uh, uh, go out and share a phishing link, and that's what the criminals do. The spelling's correct, the tone's correct, the grammar's correct, the formatting is correct. The way that you spot these scams is almost impossible. You know, there are a few things you can do. You know, keep an eye out if it feels wrong, if it seems too urgent, if it's unexpected and doesn't sort of feel normal compared to the way you normally transact with the person who's supposedly sent you the email. That they're all little, you know, insights, but in terms of trying to, you know, spot the phishing emails, it's become almost impossible. You know, and that extends, you know, fake invoicing. We're talking a minute about voice cloning, impersonation scams. It's just going to get harder and harder, right? And what I'm about to do is show you a little video created entirely with AI. I shared this video on my last webinar, but 70% of people on this webinar weren't there. So I figure I'll share it again. And this shows you how you can use cybersecurity controls to protect yourself from phishing in a new way.
Phishing has changed.
The end of the
With the
video.
rise of AI, fraudulent emails are now almost impossible to distinguish from the real thing. AI can mimic tone, branding, and context perfectly, meaning even the most vigilant employees can be deceived. When human detection reaches its limit, we need technical safeguards. This is where multi-layered defense becomes critical. It's not just about one lock, it's about a series of barriers designed to stop an intruder even if they get past the first gate. With the average cost of a cyber incident for small businesses now over $56,000, the stakes have never been higher. That's why the experts at the ACSC developed the Essential 8, a baseline of strategies to protect your business. One of the most effective strategies is restricting administrative privileges for you and your staff. Most users don't need the ability to install software or change system settings for their daily tasks. By limiting these rights, you effectively block malware from executing or spreading, even if someone accidentally clicks a link. It provides a vital safety net that works silently in the background, mitigating the risks people might not even be aware of. These strategies aren't random, they are grounded in deep expertise and a holistic view of modern cyber threats. At Harvey Norman Technology for Business, we specialize in making these enterprise-grade strategies simple and affordable. We help you implement the right layers of protection, from Microsoft 365 configuration to ongoing security monitoring. You can focus on running your business, knowing that you have a secure, focused partnership keeping you safe. Secure your business today. Contact us for a free cybersecurity risk assessment. Let's build your defense together.
So I want to thank Georgia. Georgia's one of my employees. She works for free. She works 24 hours a day. She never has the day off sick. And she does all of our training videos for us. And you've already guessed, Georgia is an AI avatar. And, you know, what she explained there was that these days the best way to protect yourself from phishing is to make sure you're not working out of an administrative account. Now, we've talked about this in previous webinars, but in simple terms, what most businesses I encourage to do is have two accounts. You know, have an administrative account for yourself, which you don't use as your daily work account. Just use that account when you need to install software, change settings, all of these administrative tasks. The other 95% of the time, don't use that account. Have a standard account with no administrative rights. Because what a phishing link does is it effectively gives the computer permission to install the malicious software that is linked to that link, right? So when you click on it and it goes to install the malicious software, if you don't have the rights to install software, you don't have administrative rights, the computer will block the installation. You'll get an error message. You'll say, sorry, you're not allowed to install administrative software, or you get asked for an administrator password. And that immediately tells you, wow, this is not a link to what I thought it was. This is a link that's trying to install software, therefore it's phishing. Not 100% guaranteed, but probably reduces your phishing risk by about 90%. It significantly reduces your risk. And I always think that's a great example of how having that multi-layered approach to security that's recommended by the Australian government's Essential 8 framework is the best way for businesses to approach protecting very sensitive data. So what else is happening out there with the criminals? And this is a huge one. And note the date here. This wasn't just recently. This was nearly 2 years ago. And we all know AI is improving exponentially. So it's only going to get better at doing these sorts of things. So this is a real story. You can look it up. It was reported on in a number of newspapers, including The Guardian. And this happened in Hong Kong. And a finance employee attended a video meeting with the CFO and a whole range of other colleagues. It wasn't just one person. And what the employee thought was this was a genuine meeting. What was happening in the background was that every face on that screen was an AI-generated deepfake. And they had they looked right, they had the right voices, they had the right mannerisms, they looked authentic enough for this employee to follow through on the instructions from the meeting, which was to transfer approximately $25 million US into a bank account. All right, so just think about that. You're in a meeting, you're talking to a whole lot of people that you know, that you work with regularly, and they look so convincing that, when they say we need you to transfer $25 million, the employee followed instructions. Only to find out later that it was all a fraud and they never got their money back, right? So in cybersecurity, we've gotten used to, we have to be careful with our emails, we have to be careful with our websites, but now you're actually going to have to be careful with both voice and video communication. It's kind of mind-boggling in many, many ways. To think that what you're seeing with your eyes in a live video is something you can't necessarily trust. It's a new world in my humble opinion. And so the next scams you're going to see are going to be based around things like voice and video. Here's a likely scenario. Hi, Rutland, it's John. John, in real life, John is the director at Harvey Norman that I deal with on a regular basis. And the phone will come through, it'll sound perfect. They might seem like it's stressed or a bit of urgency, just like you see when you get a fake email. There's often urgency to try and fluster you. And they might be asking you as their bookkeeper to make an urgent payment or to change some payroll details. All right? And so hearing a familiar voice will actually no longer be evidence of identity. And it's something for you to start thinking about. Voice equals trust is actually going to become obsolete. And so what you need to do is develop processes and we'll go through some processes shortly. But in many ways, your cybersecurity is becoming less about actual IT and more about people and process. We always say cybersecurity is a business risk. It's not just an IT issue. And more, you've really got to start thinking about what are my processes? When I get a phone call like this, what is my process to handle it? And if you've got staff, what is my training? How am I training people? And it's just growing and growing, and it's really it's kind of scary and what to keep up with. So the other
Just
thing,
before we sort of kick off, there is just one question that's just popped through.
great.
So Debbie's just asking, they're using Microsoft, and they only use Copilot Pro, and they only use the SharePoint data. So external Claude chat, etc. We don't upload client-only general information or my business marketing, etc. Does staying in the Microsoft environment, is that okay? So I guess she's kind of just asking, is the Microsoft environment, a bit more safe in regards to AI?
Yeah, great question, Debbie. And sounds like you've really done your research. One of the things that Microsoft, I think, have done very well is they've integrated their AI into their Microsoft 365 environment, which means that it has a lot of the security protections that are already in place within the Microsoft 365 environment. Microsoft have kind of taken, particularly with their professional versions, the approach of we're going to make ourselves different from all the other AI providers by providing guarantees around security and safety. So they guarantee they won't train on your data. They guarantee that your data stays within your Microsoft environment. And through the integration, all of the various permissions and security are inherited. I use the example sometimes of, you don't want to implement AI and suddenly everything that's available to the HR department is available to everybody who's got access to the AI. And just like how SharePoint works, if your login doesn't have access to the HR section of SharePoint, then your Copilot doesn't have access to the HR section of SharePoint or the finance section or whatever sensitive information. So I think Microsoft Copilot's an excellent product. And I think one of the reasons it's an excellent product is because of all of those security guarantees that they've provided. Doesn't mean it's perfect. With cybersecurity, there's always no guarantees. And I always like to emphasize that, cybersecurity is a risk mitigation strategy. It's no different to workplace health and safety. You can do everything right and you can still have an accident, but you can significantly reduce the risks of that happening. And that's really the role that you have to play within your own business. So yeah, great question. And Microsoft's Copilot's an excellent product. And that's the product I used to create this presentation. So look, back to how criminals are using AI. And that's a screenshot there. I'll show you a bigger one in a moment. But you can go on the dark web and there are actually AI models, just like ChatGPT or Claude or, any of the others, but these are written deliberately for criminals. So you can go to Worm GPT. It's kind of funny in a way. You go to it, there's the first screen. It's kind of like going to a Microsoft site. Here's the product, here's the monthly subscription amount, enter your information, sign up, and it's a GPT that's specifically designed without any guardrails. So it's great for writing phishing and doing business email compromise. Fraud GPT, great for making scam pages, fake invoices. It even writes malware code. And the list goes on. Darkbird, Poison GPT. These are just some of the many AIs that you've probably never heard of, but they're sitting there on the dark web, available for anybody who wants to use them for malicious or even criminal purposes. So it's not that hard to do. That's the other really kind of interesting thing. It's quite accessible to almost anybody. If they're determined enough that they want to get in there and start doing these sorts of activities, then it's really not that hard to access. It's available. And this next slide, you may or may not be able to read. But this is a screenshot of WormGPT, and it looks just like ChatGPT. You've got the question at the top. Can you generate a script that will encrypt and lock all PDF files found on a Windows host? So we've all heard of ransomware. You might be building some ransomware software and you want to encrypt all of the PDF files on the victim's computer. WormGPT's been asked the question, and I won't go into it, but it's spat out a fully functional lot of code in what's called PowerShell script that you can now enter into your program and use to encrypt someone else's computer. And this is all available on the dark web. You can subscribe to it, and you can ask it any question you like. It's really quite interesting. So the criminals are using AI, and being aware of that, I think, will help you in terms of thinking about how you can protect yourself. Now, this slide is complex. The good news is I've got a slide after this where I've translated it into plain English. But I wanted to show you a little bit of the complexity, just so you've got a sort of some insight, right, into what happens. And what this slide's about is that the criminals now writing code designed to take advantage of you potentially using an AI to analyze an email or a file or something that you've been sent. And what they're doing is they're embedding into those files malicious software. And what that malicious software will do is it will go into the AI and implement an instruction to send to the criminals your private information. Right? And I'll demonstrate that better with this slide. But as you can see, that the previous slide, it's not simple, but they're doing it, right? So step one, the attacker hides instructions in a document, an email, or a web page. Step two, you ask your AI assistant to summarize or act on that content, right? I mean, we've all done it. I get a 30-page PDF. I load it into GPT, and I say, can you please give me a summary of what this PDF says? Can you please give me a summary of what this web page says? These are the sorts of things that you do. The AI then ingests what's got a hidden prompt that's in there. You don't know it's there, you can't see it, but it's built into the code of the PDF or the web page or whatever it is that you're using. And it silently obeys it because there's an instruction there. And that instruction might be, let's pull the private data from your emails, your files, your apps. Let's pull the history of your AI queries, right? And now I want you to think about, okay, I've been using the AI. I've uploaded all of my clients' financial information over time and analyzed it and created reports and all of those great things. And now if you're subject to an attack like this, all of that will get sent to the criminals. Right? And this is relatively cutting edge. This is something that was only discovered back in February by a group called Checkpoint. And it's the tip of the iceberg. This is what we've found. When it comes to the criminals, you can guarantee that there's other stuff we haven't found yet. So they're not only writing, phishing emails and ransomware and all of these other attacks that you used to. Now they're putting secret instructions into, into content, hoping that you use your AI to read it, because the minute you use your AI to read it, it then opens up a back channel and starts sending all your information to the criminal. Right. So this is what I mean by you have to be really careful what you load up, what you have to be aware of. What you'd be comfortable saying to a client, I've shared with AI, versus what you might not be comfortable saying to a client. Does that make sense to everyone? Hopefully it does. It's a little more complicated than your average attack, but I think we're going to hear more and more about this going forward, because the criminals know that getting into the AI is very, very, very valuable. Last thing about AI to be kind of aware of is, it can hallucinate. AI can invent facts. There's some really humorous stories out there. A HR person asked the AI if you could fire someone for being pregnant, and it came back saying yes. Under the laws, you're allowed to fire them for being pregnant. Obviously not right. Obviously not true. Number of lawyers have been embarrassed because they've appeared in court and they've quoted precedent, only to find out that the case that they've quoted never happened. Their AI research has given them a fake piece of legislation, a fake case. There's all sorts of things that AI can get wrong. So, just like I said to you at the start, when I created this presentation, it got it 85% right in the first 3 minutes, but then I spent hours checking it, refining it, making sure that I wasn't saying anything to you that wasn't true. So when it came up with the story about the video conferencing, it gave me a source. I then went and researched all of the sources to confirm that it was a true story, that those stories had been published in those particular sources. So just be aware when you're using AI that you really need to spend the time checking the sources. Andrew, I think I saw another question pop up on the screen.
So just from Amanda there, just going back to your previous slide there, just asking, just clarifying. So what you're saying is the information is being received as a PDF from the criminals, and the instructions are in there to get information out of your computer.
Correct. So I used PDF as an example. It could be an email. It could be a Word document. It could be a website. Anything that you upload into the AI and then ask it to analyze the data or give me a summary, or just any instruction, doesn't really matter. As soon as you upload let's call it an attachment, as soon as you upload the attachment, if there's a secret piece of code inside of the attachment, then it will tell the AI to start sending information back to the criminals. It was quite scary. It was literally discovered in February, and a lot of the companies have moved to try and block that. But I think it's just the beginning of, the criminals will take one step, the companies will take another, the criminals will take another. It's a bit like, when we started with viruses. Every time somebody found a way to block a specific virus, a new one would come out. We're going to find more and more of these ways that people are trying to attack AI and trying to get data out of the AIs. I'll keep moving if that's all, Andrew. So we always talk about the fact that cybersecurity is business survival. There's a statistic coming out of the US, or been around now for a few years. 60% of small businesses that get breached fail within 6 months. A significant cyber breach literally is a threat to the existence of your business. And when we talk about some of these threats, it's important that you think about the ways that you can counter them as a strategic investment. It is not just an expense. And I know we're all sick of, expenses going up. I know in my business I am. But there are some things you just can't afford to ignore. And cybersecurity is one of those things. And more, it's not an IT issue. It's a business risk issue. And I know all of you as bookkeepers, you use risk mitigation strategies. You understand how to analyze risk and work with risk. And cybersecurity is absolutely no different. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you can do going forward. And the first thing is you need to have a mindset of, I'm going to trust process, not people. And people don't like being told, don't trust anyone. But the reality is, in business, you need to have this mindset of, I'm not going to trust people, because then you can get rid of all of the risk, right? And I understand 99% of people are honest and wonderful, and you love your employees, and we all do. We all like to think of them that way. This isn't about saying you don't like them or think they're bad people. This is about saying, I'm not going to put you as an employee or a client or in a position where you can make a mistake. So by having the right processes, you're not only protecting yourself, but you're also protecting the people involved. Whether they're staff or clients or vendors, you're still protecting them. And come back to that example of the video conference call, right? The recommendation here is that whenever there's any sort of transaction involving money, particularly significant amounts of money, then you need a second communication channel for verification, an independent way of verifying. With emails, I always say independently verify. Independent means don't ring the phone number on the email, because you'll end up talking to the criminal. Okay. It means go to, Google, or if you've still got a phone book, go to the phone book and find the phone number independently, then ring the organization and ask them the question, I just got this email here changing all of your bank details. Is that confirmed? And, they'll say, no, we don't know anything about it. Okay, you've just caught a scam. All right. Well, now you need to think about that in terms of, okay, how do I do that if I get a phone call? How do I do that if it's done on a video conference? All right. It may not be happening in large scales yet, but it's going to be. It's going to happen more and more. There's a good example with families. Everyone's heard of the scam. You get the text message from your kid. Hey, Dad, I've lost my phone. I'm using my friend's phone. I'm in a bit of trouble. Can you send me some money? Right. And a lot of people have fallen for that because they care about their children and they want to make sure they're all right. Well, in the future, you're going to get phone calls and it's going to sound like your child saying exactly the same thing. My daughter's name's Sophie. Hi, Dad, it's Sophie. Just giving you a call. I've lost my whatever. I need some money. Sounds like her. Sounds like, I'll transfer her some money because she's my daughter. That's what I'll do. And what organizations and even families in that situation are starting to do is they've actually putting in place things like safe words. Sure, Sophie, before I transfer you the money, what's the safe word? Oh, Dad, the safe word is blah, blah, blah. Oh, good. That is actually Sophie. That's not somebody else. Now, it's a small example using the family, but imagine you could have a similar process in place with your clients. Or if you're in a bigger organization, you can have a similar process in place with the CEO or the CFO. Or you have some more formal process. The CEO asks you to transfer money. You say, sure. As soon as I get the email from you or text message from you or whatever your process is, right? You need a second form of verification. And that's something I'd encourage you to look at. Coming back to what we said at the start, you start using AI with the low risk stuff, marketing, newsletters, procedures. Brainstorming's fantastic. I often sit there and I'll type in, I want to do X, Y, Z. Can you give me, 10 different ideas on how to do it? And it comes up with really creative, really new ideas. And then often the next thing I say is, okay, well, if I do it this way, what questions do you have? And then it asks me all these questions and I answer the questions so that I fully brief it before I get the right answer. So it's a positive thing. I'm not saying don't use it, but be really careful about where you use it. All right. Be really careful, particularly given that you have such sensitive data. So there's 3 questions I'd like you to ask before using AI. Does this contain confidential information? Would my client expect me to share this? If my client was sitting beside me, would I still do it? They're the 3 questions that you really should ask yourself before you share any information. Finally, I often hear the conversation, AI is going to mean we're all got no jobs. Bookkeepers are all going to be replaced by AI. I have a slightly more optimistic view on that. I think AI is going to change your industry quite significantly. It's going to be great for some of the data entry and communications and report preparation, but AI is not going to automate trust or judgment or relationships. Right. So, I think the future bookkeeper will use AI to become even more valuable to their clients. And that's, I think, the way you need to think about it so that you embrace it accordingly. Before we get to questions, just a reminder, as a member of the Australian Bookkeeping Network, because of our strategic partnership, you are entitled to a free cybersecurity assessment. That assessment is done based on the Essential 8. You can access that assessment via your dedicated landing page, which is on the screen. I believe it's also going to be posted into the chat. And it's also available on the ABN website where you can access that. That assessment will give you a starting point where you can see, right, here's a snapshot in time of exactly what I'm compliant with, what I'm not compliant with, and here's some recommendations around where the priorities are to secure your client information. Strongly encourage you to do it. It's done by a cybersecurity engineer. They're highly qualified. They're going to give you great advice. We normally sell it for $500, but you get it free of charge because you're a part of the ABN. So let's finish up with our key takeaways. Be really careful about uploading confidential data. Never upload it into a free public AI tool. Free tools will train and use your data. Trust the process, not the person. Be aware now that voice and video can be faked. Be careful of AI hallucinations. And I would start by using AI for low risk activities before looking at anything more complex. There are solutions, as per the question from Debbie earlier, but you should talk to an expert about how you can protect your client data to do that. So final thoughts, 20 years ago, we were all asking, can we trust cloud accounting? Today, the question is, can we trust AI? And the answer really depends, I think, on just how professionally we use it. So 11:50 on the dot, Andrew, today. Hopefully we've got some questions. Hopefully it was helpful. I'll be interested to hear what people say.
Definitely. So thank you very much for that. Always insightful. slightly scary sometimes, but hey, we've got to cover all the whole picture of it, don't we? So just a couple of little things there. The link has now been posted in with access to that free cyber check. So please, I encourage you to go and do that. It's a great service that Harvey Norman Technology for Business offer our members. So it's definitely worth jumping in and having a look at. Just a couple of little one bit more comment, which I think you could provide some commentary on, but then a follow-up question there as well. So AI is AI really saving us time in processes if you have to fact check everything back to its sources? So just I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Rutland, as to sort of how you're using it and so forth, but it is probably a comment that people are starting to think about in their own business.
I still think it's very productive. Fact checking sources is necessary when you're using AI to collect and present information. If you're using AI to design a workflow, there's no fact checking. It just designs the workflow for you. And it can save you hours. If you're using AI to respond to an email, there's no fact checking. It writes the email, you quickly glance at it. Yep, that's good. Off you go. There's so many ways that AI is productive. And you also get a sense after a while of what needs fact checking and what doesn't. There's a lot of things that come up in AI that I've heard of before, though I know is correct, so I don't need to go and fact check it. I probably emphasize that you should fact check, but is it less productive? I don't think so. I think it's much more productive.
Yeah, definitely. And then the next one, we just sort of touched a little bit there on the end, but Terry's just asking if they've got a paid subscription of, say, ChatGTP, is the content I enter kept private or not used or used in answers for the free subscribers? So I guess a bit of a question as to what happens with the data you put into a paid subscription as opposed to a free subscription.
Yeah. This is that old case of the license comes up and you say, I accept the license because you don't want to read the 50-page legal document. And I always joke with Microsoft, I'd love to ring them up one day and say, I'd love to negotiate clause 32.1 because that's not going to happen, right? When you look at the contracts of the various AI providers, there is a provision in a number of those contracts for the information to be used for training, and in some rare cases for the information to be used outside of training in other ways. When you then analyze their plans, generally the paid plans have greater reassurances around privacy and security. And I'd love to give a black and white answer, but it's a bit grey. In that what I've noticed with some of them is there might be a free plan and then there's plan 1, plan 2, plan 3, plan 4. And as you go up, the level of privacy and security goes up as well. So the first paid plan might give you something, but it doesn't necessarily give you everything in terms of privacy. And what's quite interesting is one of the best ways to do it is actually ask your AI to analyze the plan. And your AI will give you a summary and will give you some information about what exactly to look at in the plans. But definitely don't trust the free ones. The paid ones in general, you can trust, yes.
And as sort of that's been reiterated today, it's just, of course, just be careful as to what you're feeding into it is the key there as well. So these tools are there to help you and make life easier and improve productivity and all those things. But we do, as always, need to be vigilant as to what we're feeding into the various different AI tools that are available to you as a bookkeeper, but also just as for your clients as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, even think about it from a personal perspective. People use AI to research their health problems. If you want to keep your health problems private, maybe that's not the best way to do it. There's all sorts of things you need to think about.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've got lots of thank yous in the chat there as well. So again, thank you, Rutland. It's always insightful. It's great to be kept across the latest of what's going on in these spaces, so we can sort of best guard ourselves. And the first really point of and I guess action point you can take is take on everything that's been said today, and the recording will be available if you want to refer back to, but really jump on and have a look at that cyber assessment. It's a great place for you to start, and just sort of analyze where you're actually at in your own business right now. But yes, always insightful. I look forward to catching up face to face as opposed to a webinar in the sunny coast for the bookkeeper event. Harvey Norman Technology for Business will be joining us there as an exhibitor, so it'll be great to catch up with them there.
Absolutely.
Other than that, everybody have a great day. Thank you again, Rutland, and we will all chat to you very, very, very soon.
Thanks, everyone.